So, this is an honor. I get a few of these moments in time where I'm truly sitting across from someone that I'm just very excited about the content, not just for the value for the audience, but for me personally, right, to learn.
I hope I don't disappoint you. It's a pretty good build-up here. I'm a little frightened.
I don't think you're going to. So this session is really just a listening session for us, and you know listening parties very well, given your background in history. So first question, iHeartMedia. It's been Clear Channel for so long. It's a little over a month now since you became iHeartMedia. The iHeartMedia brand started as an app, really, right? iHeartRadio in 2008, and now in 2014, it has become your corporate brand. Talk to us about that evolution. What were the drivers? How did that happen internally?
Well, look, I think at the end of the day, when we took over Clear Channel, we built out new lines of business. We really began to think of reaching the consumer and not so much thinking about silos of business. And over time, we've got a broadcast radio group which reaches 245 million people a month in the US, which makes it bigger than Facebook, Google, all the broadcast networks. We have a digital group that reaches almost 100 million people a month. We've got 20,000 events a year. Our social network is now, you add up Facebook and Twitter, over 50 million users. And when we did the iHeartRadio Music Festival, it had 5 billion social impressions, about the same as the Academy Awards. So when you look at all this stuff, you begin to say, you know, we've sort of outgrown the name. And I'll take the iHeartRadio Music Festival, which we did about a month ago. That was content for our radio stations. It was content for Yahoo. It was content for the CW. It was a contest for our radio stations. It was an event unto itself. It was social for us. It was all these things, and I think the lines get so blurry. And so we were looking for a name that sort of captured what we are. I've done this once before. I once ran a company called Warner MX Satellite Entertainment Corporation. We, I think, quite intelligently changed the name to MTV Networks when we realized we had one product everybody knew us for and the other they didn't. So for me, I think, again, it was just we sort of outgrew the name. Nothing wrong with the name, proud old name. But I would spend about the first 20 minutes of every meeting with people explaining why we weren't who they thought we were. I think with iHeartMedia, it's really a look toward the future and much better represents who we are.
So as you think about that, right, and again, as you said, you've done this more than once before, that requires a great confidence in your consumer awareness. The relationship between your brands, the content you produce, and the audiences. It's I think intimate is probably the nature of that world, the nature of the way to best describe the relationship. When you pull into those learnings now, it's not just changing the name of the company to represent who you are. What changes about the content? What changes about the focus? Are there things in the business that itself, in the way you produce and express yourself, that will change as well as you become iHeartMedia?
Well, look, we've got a huge brand. It has 70% brand awareness, which is a remarkable achievement for anyone. Or for any brand in a 3-year period. And we were the fastest service in the history of the internet to hit 20 million registered users. We were fastest music service to hit 50 million. We hit it also faster than Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, etc. So it's a service with a lot of momentum. And I think what it is, what we're looking at, and especially with one of the topics here today, is programmatic. For us, what we're really thinking about is how do we use all the data we have and big data to really take the business to a whole other level that people can't conceive of. People keep talking about big data in terms of I can target better, I can buy better, I can get those impressions more targeted. And I go, you know, maybe that's missing the point. Because every one of those explanations says the ROI is still in the hands of the buyer. So somebody comes to us and says, I want to buy some impressions, we sell it to them, but the return on that investment is their responsibility. I think what data is going to do is fundamentally transform the media business, and we're going to be about selling ROI. That now that there's the data there, the people sitting on the other side of the table, who, by the way, have the money, therefore the power, are going to say, you know what, you be responsible for the ROI. You give me a return on my money. I'll give you $1 million. I need you to give me $2 million, $3 million, $4 million, $5 million, $6 million, pick the number back. And that's going to be the negotiation. And I think that's what we're driving to. And the idea that we're going to tweak how we serve impressions is, to me, very simplistic and sort of living in the past. And we're trying to get ready for it and understand the implications and how we would do that. And by the way, you would think, oh my God, now it's bad for the media business because the buyers are forcing one more difficult thing on us. I actually think in a funny way it'll be good for us, because as I look at our use of inventory, and I just spent about 2 hours this morning looking at a chart of it all, and we're sort of trying to understand where it's going, is if you're responsible for the ROI, you're the buyer, and you come to, let's say, Z100, you're going to want to buy Elvis Duran because he's probably the most powerful show we've got on the air. And then everybody wants to buy Elvis Duran at the cheapest price they can get Elvis Duran for, but they understand there's a difference. If we're responsible for the ROI, then you're not really care what inventory we use. And we know there are places in which we can pull the inventory, and I think it's going to allow us to maximize our use of our inventory better to go that direction. But we're going to have to be a lot smarter about our data. We're going to have to be a lot smarter about attribution. I mean, the industry's all sort of been a land grab for attribution. For a while, Google took all the attribution for search, as if people just woke up one morning and go, oh my God, I want to search for, GoPro. Something probably motivated them to do that upstream. And I think we're getting a lot smarter about understanding which one of these elements, and by the way, the combination of these elements lead to a search or a purchase or a visit or a sign up, or, by the way, hanging on, improving churn. And so I think we're going to get a lot smarter about attribution. We're going to get a lot smarter about not only ROI overall, but where do we deliver that ROI? And by the way, short tail or long tail on it. So I think what's in store for us is a radical change, maybe the biggest change I've ever seen in the business. And I think it's going to be a bigger change than when TV started guaranteeing ratings, which, by the way, was years and years ago. And at that time, oh my God, you're going to ruin the business by guaranteeing ratings. Now everyone does it. And I think we're getting ready to get into guarantee ROI. And I think that's going to fundamentally change every relationship out there.
So what you're talking about, again, is not, this is a little more than an evolutionary change taking place inside your aspect of the business. All the conversations are going to change between the buyers and sellers, right?
And by the way, I don't think it's my business. I think it's going to be everybody's business.
It's everyone's business.
I think the whole business is going to go through this. So therefore, what I'm trying to do for our company is solve for how are we going to participate in that world and not live in the past and say, oh yeah, the data is going to help me sell my impressions better. That data is going to hand to the buyer the clout to say, you deliver an ROI to me.
So it was back in July, I think I read it, LinkedIn gives you all the updates that you hired a new president of technology and digital, right, at now iHeartMedia, and he reports directly to you, right? So it is that critical to your business. What do other media companies need to do beyond taking C-level ownership of this? How do you get your teams educated to talk in this different way? Is it top down, bottoms up at the same time? But you're changing the organization, you're changing the culture.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think that's exactly it. I think it's really about how do you affect change, primarily through cultural changes. Until you get your culture changed, everything's a platitude. We're going to be picket. It's just a platitude or a chart hanging on the wall until it's built into the culture. Great companies, every employee reflexively just does the right thing because the culture drives them there. I've been through a few transformations. I've been through building a few companies. To me, it always starts with what's our goal? Then let's translate that goal into the mission we have so we can get there. Then we have to turn into an operating plan, something that's actionable, filled with strategies and tactics. And then we staff the plan. You'll see a lot of people say, I'm going to hire somebody, they're going to figure it out. Well, you got to have a plan first before you even know who to hire, how to build that job. The jobs ought to follow the plan you have. And then the last thing I ever do in a company is you build the corporate culture which perpetuates your goal, your strategy, your mission. And that's the hardest part. And if you've been around, it's easier when you're starting a company. When we started MTV, I interviewed every single employee. Now, as a kid, and I don't know why I knew to do this, but I interviewed down to secretaries, down to production assistants, and what I was looking for is I wanted everybody to be on our mission, that we were on a mission from God to create this new thing. And so when you start a company, you're starting the culture from scratch, you can do that. It's harder when you take a company like Clear Channel, it's been around a long time, was actually the product of many mergers, 20,000 employees, 40 countries, to transform the culture. But I think you have to do it in big ways, and you've got to have everybody aboard. And it's a learning experience for everybody, and it's a learning between, oh, that's what you meant by those words. Here's the example, here's how it works. And by the way, to see people get the system of rewards they want in a company. Some companies get rewarded for saying the right thing. Some companies get rewarded for shutting your mouth. Some, companies get rewarded for, saluting the C-suite. In our company, you don't. In our company, we worship dissent. We want to have, my view is consensus is the worst decision, because consensus says that's the idea that's really the safe idea. It's an old idea. It's a comfortable idea. The great breakthrough ideas are the ones that scare everybody to death. I'm not going to propose that. I'm not going to say that. Wow, that could kill the company. Those are the ideas you want to hone in on. And you have to build a culture that says, reward people to speak up, say those ideas, explore those ideas, and by the way, debate them. For someone to say, that sounds like a great idea, but raise the red flags, raise the dissent. Let's understand all aspects of an idea if we're going to embrace it and drive it home.
So again, that thinking is different. It's ambitious. It's brave, right? Even to do that.
I'm so old. I don't mind taking chances. You're young. You worry about taking chances.
Well, the danger is, success, especially perpetuating success over time, usually breeds some in this static nature, right? It usually says, well, let's just do what we did last year a little bit better. I like this idea of sort of celebrating dissension, celebrating the radical idea in the room. Take me back a little bit. When iHeartRadio comes along and you start thinking app listening, right? Are you thinking at that moment that mobile is going to change the business, or are you thinking at that moment we just have to follow the consumer? How does mobile as a new platform, as the dominant screen, how did that turn into where you are today?
Well, it's interesting. I think we didn't start from let's do things. I do what I've always done. I mean, how on earth do I have a career where I've been in the real estate business, the theme park business, the cable TV network business, the internet business, and on and on? Because I always look at the consumer. And the person who's buying a house, same person who listened to MTV or watched MTV, same person who listens to one of our radio stations. That if you understand consumer behavior, what I find it is remarkably constant. That consumers are interested in convenience and brands. And brands, you might argue, is a subset of convenience. That if you can save them time, you win. And the evolution of, what's the internet done for us? What's mobile done for us? It saved me time. And so when I look at our business, our strategy was be where the consumers are with the products and services they want. And if we don't deliver it, they'll find the substitute. If I love Diet Coke and I go to the supermarket and they have no Diet Cokes, maybe I'll buy a Diet Pepsi, but I don't want to. If a year goes by and I bought Diet Pepsis for a year, I may have actually lost my brand preference for Coke and moved to Pepsi because it wasn't available. We have these monstrous brands over the air. That's how we reach all those consumers, whether it's Z100 or KISS FM in LA or KFI or WLW. And so the challenge is to make sure that the consumer can get the brands. Our radio stations are not about a transmitter and a tower. That's just one delivery system. They are now delivered over iHeartRadio, and probably 20 to 30% of the cume will at one time or another listen on digital, which is now, it's only about, in our case, about 4% of listening, and all of digital added together in the denominator with broadcast radio is only 10% of all listening in this country. So it's small, but it's growing and growing nicely. But what we love is that the consumer can move seamlessly between these platforms, and they don't know and they don't care, other than they can find what they want when they want it. When I look at mobile, which is a little different idea, to me, what I find so interesting about mobile is I've been in the business since 1969. And my entire career has been driving toward one point, the connected home. It was behind the Time and Warner merger. It was behind creating Warner Amex Satellite Entertainment Corporation. We're going to have all these cable channels for this connected home. They wanted everything we could give them. Even the AOL Time Warner merger was about the connected home. Funny thing happened. It turns out it's the connected individual, not the connected home. And now, in the last 10 years, Americans spend 31% more time in their car. 31% more time than they did 10 years ago. It's moved to out of home. And to me, that's the beauty of all this mobility. Now, our company is built around it. One of the reasons I came out of retirement and decided, okay, I'll be a CEO one more time, even though I swore I'd never do this again, is that because I couldn't resist playing at this major macro level with this company that accidentally has all the right assets: outdoor, radio, and now we built a digital service and a major digital player as well. What's interesting about mobile, if you talk to most of the advertisers, I presume a lot of people in this room are advertisers, when you talk about why was mobile so good, they're talking about all the stuff out of home. You know, what's happening in the 30 minutes before someone makes a purchase. You have enormous influence. Turns out in the 30 minutes before people make their purchase, 49% of the people have listened to the radio, 21% have seen an outdoor, and everything else is single digits. It turns out that what we call mobile, and by the way, we love it, and it's a nice add-on for us, almost 2/3 of the use is consumed in the home. When you look at what we call radio, 2/3 of the use is consumed out of home. So not only has radio got a scale that mobile doesn't yet have, but it also has the out-of-home attribute for marketers that everyone so desperately wants. And for us, we think the two are completely linked. And you might argue, well, the only thing I can do with mobile that I can't do with radio is I can't get to that data matching. Now that we've got 20 to 30% of our listeners on our radio stations at some time or another listening to the station on the iHeartRadio platform, I can grab their data. I now know who they are. And just like a Facebook doesn't know everybody, but if they know enough people, they can project into the people they don't know to know who they are. We now have enough information to project into these massive audiences. I mean, you know, Z100 in New York has 5 million listeners, one radio station in the market. Numbers that really have an impact. So if we could project in and understand where I can find the people who are shopping for diapers at 11 o'clock in the morning, or where I can find the people who haven't bought a car for 10 years but have recently been shopping for a car through some of the data we know about them, then I can say, okay, here's 500,000 of these people, 250,000, here's exactly the moment you should advertise. Now we can do everything that we have thought was limited to what we call digital, and now we can project it out to this other electronic medium. And what I love about radio is if radio had been invented after the internet, we would be marveling at the amazing frequency. There's no buffering. There's no data charge. It's the future, FM radio. And so to me, it is a matter of, okay, let's just think, if we are where we are, forget what was invented when. How can we use these vehicles in ways that really maximize the value? First, you have to build a great consumer relationship. I think advertising is nothing more than renting our consumer relationship to third parties. It is not a 30-second spot. It's not a hello. It's anything you can think of to do with that relationship is what we're doing, and we're forcing ourselves to think about it in new and exciting ways.
It's fun listening to your description of it, right? So now, as you think about that, you're beginning to rent these relationships. But earlier you said that that the ownership for ROI really now belongs to the publisher, the one who primarily owns that consumer connection.
Well, I'm afraid instead of belongs, I think we're going to be forced to deliver it.
Forced to deliver it.
And because look, who wants to take the risk?
Yeah.
But the person with the money is in the position to say, you know what, I got the money. You want my money? You guarantee me an ROI.
And it's fair, though. You could also argue that the publisher has the most knowledge of what should work.
Absolutely.
Right? They know their property.
Or we should.
You should. So talk to me about technology, right? Our theme today is programmatic, the new normal. This new president of technology and digital for your company also has programmatic responsibility. How's programmatic playing into this? And how do you think about the use of, again, workflow automation as well as, auction-based technology to move your digital assets around?
Well, it's interesting. To me, I think programmatic is great for the business because we're automating something to make it better, easier, and more robust. Who can argue with that? Somebody told me they just saw Erwin Gottlieb speak, and he said the opposite of programmatic isn't premium. The opposite is manual. And I think that's a great line, because I think people get confused to think, oh, programmatic's about the cheapest price. I actually have a theory that, people saying digital just doesn't perform anymore. Digital's dead. I don't think digital's, or display. I don't think display is bad, and I don't think display stopped performing. I think what happened was we had a dumb algorithm, and the dumb algorithm looked for the cheapest display. If you, by definition, the cheapest display is the worst performing display. If you bought the cheapest radio, you would have the worst performing radio. Matter of fact, there was an ROI study done by Nielsen, and they measured one advertiser that happened to run ROS cheap spots on the radio, and then they bought our most premium stuff, the iHeartMedia Music Festival. They got 3 times the ROI on the most expensive stuff. I think what happened in display is we had a bad algorithm. And instead of saying, wait a minute, we've got a bad algorithm that can't discern between the value in the inventory, they think all inventory is like a gold brick. It's the same no matter where I buy it. Instead of, there's quite a difference in the inventory. You get, my day at AOL, you got the front page of AOL, performed a hell of a lot better than any sub-page would. So, and by the way, certain corners of the page perform better and certain size perform better. So I think the challenge we have in going forward is, let's don't make the same mistake that was made in display. By the way, I still use display as a marketer, and I find there's some great display out there. But if I go for the cheapest display, it doesn't work so well. What I'm really looking for is, again, that's why I go back to ROI. It's not price, it's value. I'll spend $1 million if I can get 10 million back before I'll spend 100,000 and get 50,000 back. And so I think the challenge for us as we move forward in programmatic is write an algorithm that can catch the difference. There's a difference between advertising and radio on the Elvis Duran show and a music station that just happens to run a spot now and then, and you land on it. Elvis, everybody's intently listening to the phone taps and everything he's saying. He only plays 2 or 3 records an hour. He has got an incredibly engaged audience. That spot's going to perform better. You need an algorithm that can capture that, so that as we move into programmatic, we're giving people an ROI. And I think the people using programmatic, whoever's designing the systems and the algorithm, is going to be held accountable for, did it give me a good ROI? And by the way, when I went to programmatic, did it give me a better ROI than what I'm a human being buying? If it didn't, it's going to fail. And it's going to fail not because that's nice that it's easier and we can save cost and it can move faster, but if it can't give us a better outcome for every dollar we spend, it's not going to be a success. And I think, by the way, if it happens again after display, I think now people are going to correctly look and say, wait a minute, I think it was the algorithm problem, it was the programmatic buying, not the actual inventory that was the problem. And so as we're spending our time, we're trying to go through and say, capture what are those variables and how do you understand those variables in a way that you can write an accurate algorithm that can replicate the best possible media buyer, not the worst possible media buyer. I mean, I can hire a moron to come in and say, pick the lowest price for every spot and buy that for me. Oh, that doesn't take much skill. But the great buyers, human buyers, have been able to look at the landscape and figure out how, out of all that out there, to spend the money the best way to get the maximum return in terms of results for the advertiser. And I think all of us have gotten into a business that's been around long enough that we've all gotten caught up in the process. I'm the master of the process. I know how to do this, instead of the goal. And the goal is an advertiser has money and they're looking to make money on that investment. That the smart advertisers don't think of their ad dollars as a cost, they think of it as an investment. And they demand and deserve a return on that investment. And the challenge, again, whether it is human being or whether it's programmatic, it's the same. Give me the ROI. I've been on the other side of this. I've sold media some in my life. I'm in a media company now. I've been a user of media in a lot of companies. When I was at AOL, I had this wonderful invention or innovation I had. When I got there, we had $1 billion direct marketing budget. We were losing about $500 million a year, so what did I do? I cut the budget to $500 million, so we would break even. But we put $60 million back in brand advertising. Now, our direct marketing experts at the time said, wait a minute, we don't get a return on that. And why? Well, we've tested radio and TV, and it just doesn't give us enough return. And I go, what are you measuring? Well, I'm measuring how many people call the 800 number to buy the service. It's not a channel. Radio and TV are a response rate enhancer. We spent the $60 million, because I won the argument, because I outranked them, and our response rate more than doubled. And we got more subscribers for $500 million than we were getting at $1 billion run rate. And so I think as you put together these media plans and we put together these programs using programmatic, we need to understand all of those elements and how they fit together. We also have to stop thinking about things in silos. I'm always amused with this cut between a broadcast radio buyer and a digital buyer. Because I go, okay, if I have a phone with an FM chip on it, so you're telling me when Z100 is on the FM chip, I should have one buyer buying this spot, but when they happen to use iHeartRadio on exactly the same phone, they're listening to exactly the same content, exactly the same second, that's a digital buyer? And I think the agencies are beginning to understand that and beginning to put together more integrated, either cross-trained or integrated buying groups, because I think that's important. Therefore, I think the programmatic follows that as well, that as opposed to a series of silos of programmatic buying, someone's got to take responsibility for the entire media mix programmatic buying. What's the ideal mix? Now, we have these media mix models out here, which are really interesting. I came back to this business 3 years ago, and I began meeting with some advertisers. And they'd say, Bob, it's just the return on radio isn't great. And I go, how do you know that? And they go, well, my media mix model. So I go, gee, I better look into that a little bit. Guess what? Turns out there was no data for radio that was ingestible. What they were doing is they're taking radio data and averaging it. So it didn't, what happens in a media mix model is they're looking at correlations between bought advertising, sales results. They had averaged it, so they took all the spikes and valleys out. So of course it didn't correlate with anything. It's actually only about 6 months that the ingestible radio data has been available. So, again, it's garbage in, garbage out. As we go into this, I think that media mix model needs to get robust and it needs to get wildly accurate. And oh, by the way, the media mix models may be replaced by attribution studies, which are getting more and more towards single source ROI studies. And the programmatic is going in that direction. I think it's going to a level of sophistication that I'm not hearing a lot of people talk about. I'm hearing a lot of people talk about, I got my digital, then maybe I'll take it to broadcast, and maybe I'll take it to TV and radio, and they keep talking about silos. The consumer doesn't consume media in a silo. There is no TV viewer versus a radio viewer. The person listening to Z100 in the morning is watching TV at night. And oh, by the way, they're on their cell phone. They're reading a magazine. They're reading a newspaper. They're touching all media. And so each one of us in the media business talks to that same person at different times or for different periods of time, or in our case, maybe we talk to more people than others do, but we're still talking about the human beings and how they construct. So if I'm trying to sell a product, the question is, in a day they're touched by all this media. Which one of those do I need, and how should they interact, and how should they interrelate with each other to get the maximum impact for my dollar in convincing that person that they want to buy this product, or connecting the product to the consumer. And I think we're not nearly as far along in that as we should be. And in my mind, as I'm sort of thinking through what we've got to do, we got to do it. You go back to, we were talking a little bit about cultural stuff. I think we've also got to get to the zone that as human beings, we all want to do stuff that makes us feel okay. We don't like that feeling of adrenaline and panic and anxiety. If we're going to deal with the future, you've got to have an organization in which everybody's feeling that, in which they're feeling uncomfortable, and they're feeling at risk, they're feeling anxiety, they've got adrenaline squirting through their veins, because that means we're really thinking about the future, which it means we don't know yet how it's going to happen. We don't know all the risk yet. And there are risks waiting for us out there. They're going to scare us to death when they become apparent. And so culturally, I think all of us who really want to go to the future, if everybody's feeling pretty good about stuff in your company and everybody's pretty relaxed, you're probably not really dealing with the big issues you've got to deal with for the future.
Couldn't agree more. I find myself listening to so much of this, and then now getting back to this concern I have for all the companies in our space, which is, what is the role then of scale in your organization, right? And here's how I'm tying that together. You can think about the big issues, but there's almost disruptive behavior that big scale entities have in digital, that just a movement on their part changes the landscape rapidly. with the strength of your consumer connections that you have with all of your brands, all of those touch points, how relevant is scale, and do you think about it? Do you fret about that, or do you just double down on the intimacy relationship that you have?
No, look, I think scale is critical, which is one of the reasons I came back to work here. It's because this company has the #1 reach of any media company in the United States. And we have enormous scale, and you're absolutely correct. If you can find the right place to apply your scale, you can make it go one direction or another. And without scale, the greatest idea in the world sits on a shelf. And that's, I'm listening to all this sort of big think stuff, which drives me crazy and gets my adrenaline going and makes me uncomfortable. But I think you have to think this stuff through before you play your scale. Your scale's a big card. And when you play it, you'll often make things go right or left. One of the last things I did at AOL was Google came to us. They were originally, the business model was they would sell the search engine to players. We were using Inktomi and paid Inktomi, and Google wanted to be the search engine there. And they had this novel idea of self-serve advertising, but they had no scale. At that time, AOL had half the traffic on the internet. And they came to us and said, why don't you put Google in as the search engine? We did. But it was a long decision. It was all about who are we going to give our scale to, because we had a competing service that's probably not even in existence now that was going to pay us an equal amount of money. They were actually paying us because they wanted the scale to do that. And by the way, we eventually bet on not who gave us the most money, but who we thought had the best search engine, because ultimately the consumer wins in these. And by the way, initially AOL owned, I think it was 10% of Google as a result of doing this deal. And so it's where you play your card. So we played our AOL card to Google. And I think it's very important as you go through these big decisions is where you play your scale card.
Now you are, you said it earlier, you're an entrepreneur, a media visionary, a media executive now again, and also a consumer. Dial me out 2 years. What are you looking at? What's interesting to you? What starts getting sort of is the thing that you're thinking about in either of those, any of the 4 areas? What are you thinking about in terms of business models, company opportunities, even for iHeartMedia that you are willing to share that you feel like you could tell us about?
Well, look, some of it is playing out the things we've been talking about. Where do they go? How do they fit together? How do our radio stations fit together with the events? How do they fit together with outdoor? Our outdoor is increasingly becoming an iPad on a stick. And by the way, we've got stuff that's interactive. I don't know if you saw our board in the UK, which won a lot of awards, where we had the British Airways campaign, which we worked with O&M on, and which the kid comes out and points to the British Airways flight going overhead, walks back in, and then it says, that was British Airways, whatever, from Rio de Janeiro. And it's about using these things we have in new and exciting ways, enabled by technology and enabled by new knowledge. So I think it's terribly exciting, and I think, by the way, as I look at those things, I think everything's always a sort of a decision tree. If it goes this way, then we have these 4 possibilities. If it goes this way, we got these 4 possibilities. If it goes this way, we got these 4 possibilities. So it's a matter of sort of thinking about, we're not sure which way it's going to go. So if it goes in any one of these, what is our plan then? So it's plan A, B, C, D. And then coming off of that, you have probably 4 or 5 plans. And you can take it to sort of the infinite level. So now you begin to bet on where am I really want to put my resources, because I can't afford to fund them all. And that's the kind of decision making we have in the company. And also, as you look at enabling all these, you either build, make, you buy, or you partner. And to us, we increasingly look at who are the people we can partner with, because my career has been built with partnering with record companies, partnering with technology companies, partnering with social networks, and it's all about how do we combine our strengths to get something that neither one of us could get alone. And so we spend a lot of time looking at those opportunities and examining who, when, how.
That's it's pretty good. So I'm going to, I think we've got just 3 minutes, and I didn't want to end this one without giving the audience an opportunity to ask just maybe 1 or 2 questions. So we're going to open it up just for 1 or 2 questions. I'll translate the question just so that we don't waste time running around with a microphone. Anybody or any question out there that I did not get to that someone is burning to ask?
Or an insult. That's what works too.
You're right in the front. Go for it, Chris.
Sure. How is iHeartRadio, and forgive my ignorance, China, partnerships in China, how would you give Drew advice about working with that territory, which is increasingly valuable and terrifying at the same time? So I'm just curious your thoughts.
Well, look, China has, at the end of the day with iHeartRadio, a lot of it has to do with music rights. So do the people who own the music rights want to go to China? Because ultimately that will determine whether we go to China. We're there in the outdoor business, and I agree with you. It's a terrific opportunity. Lots of people, increasingly middle class in terms of consumption, but it's fraught with the legal systems different from ours, different rules, different history, different players. And I think you really have to get super specific in China, and I'm not sure there's any blanket advice that I could give you for China. Witness some very smart people who haven't done well there, and some very smart people who have done well there. And I think it's probably just the difference in approach and who they were doing business with.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. I see another hand. Go for it.
Quick one. Over the top versus bundled. Movies come to your home. They don't go to the theater.
I think at the end of the day, the way you predict that is convenience. What's the easiest for the consumer? And if the consumer has to put a lot of pieces together to assemble something that looks like a cable offering, it's not going to be mass. If it's the easiest thing to do is just push a button and they're all there, that's probably easy. Easy wins, not quality. If quality won, 50% of the US households would not have gotten rid of their wired line because the quality is much better on the wired line. It doesn't drop calls, it doesn't distort them, it doesn't sound like Darth Vader. It's pretty cool. And in my experience, and again, I'm a 60-year-old guy, so maybe the patterns are misleading me, but I've never seen quality beat convenience. And I think nor have I seen cost beat convenience, that people will pay a premium to save time. There's always a segment that's interested in cord cutting, over the top, et cetera, and I think there's certainly a market for it, unless it gets a lot more convenient, which it may, and there may be people who say my whole job is to make it more convenient. I think it's going to be very hard to beat the idea that somebody else put the package, I'll just buy the package and it's all there whenever I'm ready for it. When I was at HBO with Time Warner and AOL, there was a significant group of consumers who bought the subscription service and never used it. Why'd they buy it? Because just in case I want to use it one day. And I think a lot of cable that people miss is you pay for a lot of stuff you never use. Anybody in this room belong to a gym that you don't go to every week? It's the secret of the gym business. If everybody showed up at a gym membership, they'd be out of business. And so I think that really plays into that human behavior really is relevant over gyms, pay TV, internet services, et cetera. I think it's true here too.
Listen, I just cannot be more thankful than to just use the biggest, coolest word that you can do in the entire English language to say thank you very much for